Chapter 3. The Amplitude of Memory. And immediately, like the amplitude of a cardiogram, jerking from top to bottom, like a pendulum breaking from its familiar trajectory, memory crashed into minor. From the bright major of the first meeting, from sunny Kharkiv and the taste of ice cream, straight into the painful darkness of another memory. Arkadiy closed his eyes, but the image didn't disappear. On the contrary, it became even brighter, even more distinct, as if someone had turned the brightness knob to maximum. Kharkiv, northern Saltovka, their apartment on the 10th floor. Marshall, still young, ginger, fluffy, full of feline dignity and charm. This was when? 3 years ago? Or 4? The time before the war merged into one endless strip of happiness, where each day resembled the previous one in its measured pace and differed in its small joys. The children were younger then, more naive, funnier.
Olga, 10 years old, serious beyond her years, but still believing in fairy tales. Luka, a 7-year-old rascal who could play hide-and-seek with Marshall for hours. Katya, a 4-year-old little one who considered the cat her best friend and told him all her secrets. It was Katya's idea, though no, the idea was born collectively, as often happens with children, when one's thought is picked up by others and turns into a grand plan. "Daddy," said Katya one morning, sitting on Arkadiy's lap and stroking the purring Marshall, "why doesn't Marshall have a bride?" "Cats don't have brides," Luka laughed. "They have girlfriends." "Not true," Katya protested. "The prince had a bride, and Marshall is a cat prince." And indeed, Marshall was handsome, ginger, with a white chest and white paws, with intelligent yellow eyes and a luxurious tail. You couldn't call him purebred, but there was some special feline aristocracy about him, an innate nobility.
"Let's find him a bride," Olga chimed in. "A beautiful kitty. And they'll have kittens," Katya clapped her hands. "Little ginger kittens." Angelina, standing at the stove preparing breakfast, turned with a smile. "Have you asked Marshall if he wants a bride?"
The children looked seriously at the cat. Marshall, as if understanding they were talking about him, raised his head and meowed. "See?" exclaimed Katya. "He said yes." Thus began Operation Bride for Marshall, as Luka called it, who at that time was fascinated by war films and called everything operations. The children approached the matter with all seriousness. First, they arranged a photo session for Marshall. Arkadiy remembers how they persuaded the cat to pose, how they arranged him in the most advantageous positions, how they argued which photograph better conveyed his character. "This one is too serious," Olga criticized a photo where Marshall sat with an imperturbable look. "He looks like a judge." "And this one is too playful," Luka disagreed, showing a photo where the cat was playing with a ball. "Brides like serious grooms." "And this one is just right," decided Katya, choosing a picture where Marshall lay on the windowsill, turning his ginger face to the sun. "He's handsome and romantic." Then they wrote an advertisement. This was a real creation of collective intelligence. Each word was discussed. Each phrase underwent strict family selection. "Handsome ginger cat seeks a bride," Olga dictated, and Arkadiy wrote it down. "Very handsome," Katya corrected. "Smart, handsome, and well-mannered cat," Luka suggested. "And do we need to indicate his age?" Olga wondered. "Absolutely," Katya authoritatively declared. "Mom says that age is important." In the end, the text turned out touching and naive. "Handsome, smart, and very well-mannered ginger cat Marshall, 2 years old, seeks a female cat for a serious relationship. Loves children, doesn't scratch, knows his place. Character is calm, romantic. Owners are a friendly family. We live in a nice apartment. Call after 6 p.m. The children insisted on making the advertisement colorful. Olga drew a border with little hearts, Luka added paw prints in the corners, and Katya colored the whole thing with colored pencils. It turned out very sweet and very childlike. The color printer made many copies.
Then began the most interesting part, posting the advertisements. The children drew up a real plan of the neighborhood, marking all the strategically important points: building entrances, transit stops, playgrounds, shops. Many grandmothers sit here, Olga explained, pointing to a bench near the entrance of a neighboring building. And grandmothers always have cats. And here young mothers walk with children, Luka added. They're kind, they'll help us. And this is just a beautiful place, concluded Katya. Brides like beautiful places. They walked around the neighborhood all day, armed with tape, pushpins, and unshakable faith in the success of the enterprise. Arkadiy remembers how proud he was of his children, seeing with what enthusiasm they approached the task, how they politely asked permission from janitors to hang an advertisement on the bulletin board, how they explained to passers-by that they were doing a good deed, seeking happiness for their cat.
38, by the way, accompanied them on this campaign. He sat in a special carrier that Luka carried with an important air and occasionally made his voice heard, as if approving their actions. "See, he's saying thank you," Katya translated the cat's meowing. By evening, the entire neighborhood was decorated with colorful advertisements about the search for a bride for Marshall. The children returned home tired but happy, full of hopes and plans. "They'll start calling tomorrow," Olga confidently stated. "Maybe even today," Katya dreamily added. "We need to buy Marshall a nice collar," Luka practically suggested, "for the first date." Arkadiy smiled, looking at his children. Angelina was preparing dinner and also smiling. Lyudmila Petrovna, usually reserved in showing emotions, openly admired the children's initiative. Even Marshall seemed pleased. He lay in his favorite spot by the radiator and purred, as if anticipating romantic adventures. This was one of those moments when you understand that happiness is right here, nearby, in children's laughter, in a family dinner, in a cat's purring, in plans for tomorrow. Simple, accessible, such ordinary happiness that seems eternal. But it wasn't eternal. They came home after the second day of posting advertisements. The children decided to expand the geography of the search and capture neighboring yards. They returned satisfied and excited. 2 families had already contacted them, and the first viewings were planned for tomorrow. And then they were met by Lyudmila Petrovna, with eyes red from tears. "What happened, Mama?" Angelina was frightened. "Marshall," her mother-in-law began and faltered. "He scratched me. Badly. Drew blood." The children crowded around their grandmother, examining the scratches on her arm. Indeed, deep, ugly marks. "How did this happen?" asked Arkadiy. "I wanted to pick him up, and maybe he's sick? Usually he's so affectionate." Angelina, as a doctor, carefully examined the scratches. "We need to treat these, and take Marshall to the vet, just in case." "I already took him," Lyudmila Petrovna said quietly. "And what did the doctor say?" The mother-in-law paused, not raising her eyes. "He said the cat needs to be neutered, that it will help make him calmer. Otherwise, he could be very dangerous, and we have children." Silence fell. The children didn't immediately understand the meaning of the word neuter, but from the adults' faces guessed that it was something serious. "And?" Arkadiy cautiously asked. "I agreed," whispered Lyudmila Petrovna. "The doctor said it's a simple operation, that the cat will be better off. And I was in pain. I was afraid he had become aggressive." "So you already—" Angelina didn't finish. "Yes, it's already done. He's sleeping now, recovering from the anesthesia." The children suddenly understood what had happened. Katya was the first to cry. "But what about the bride? What about kittens?" "He won't have kittens anymore?" asked Olga, and in her voice was adult sadness. Luka was silent, but from his face it was clear that he too understood the scale of the catastrophe. Arkadiy hugged his children, trying to find words of comfort. But what words can there be? How to explain to children that sometimes adults make decisions that destroy children's dreams? That life is often cruel to our plans? Marshall will still be happy, he finally said, just in a different way.
But we posted advertisements, Katya sobbed. People will call us tomorrow.
We'll take down the advertisements, Angelina promised, and we'll explain to everyone. Marshall slept through the night. He woke up the next day lethargic, sad, with a plastic collar around his neck that prevented him from licking his stitches. The children took turns sitting next to him, stroking him, saying kind words. And in the evening, Katya approached Arkadiy with a sheet of paper. "Daddy, I wrote a poem."
About Marshall, and she read in a trembling voice. Planet Earth. A cat named Marshall, with lineage of Napoleon. An announcement on the fence. Our kitty's grown and seeks a bride, a companion. And no one thought it would happen this way. The mistress he suddenly bit. Sex he needs, for our fluffy one has grown, become a man. A little girl quietly weeps, tearing down announcements rank. The kitty was neutered. Who's now a castrate? It is he. No need for feline girlfriends now. All dreams reduced to food in his bowl. And no longer is he drawn to the ginger yard cat girl. Life passes dully and quietly proceeds, for he is lonely and no one comes. Unworthy, unwanted, powerless to change. And how many cats like him? How many in graves? Life without love is very brief. A gentle death will soon overtake him. The fluffy one won't live long. And all because he cannot love.
Arkadiy listened to the child's verse and felt something constrict in his chest. In these naive lines was all the pain of unfulfilled hopes, all the childish sorrow for destroyed dreams. And Marshall, as if understanding that they were talking about him, came to Katya and rubbed against her legs. He no longer scratched anyone, became calmer, more affectionate. But in his yellow eyes sometimes flashed a kind of longing, as if he remembered those days when passions boiled within him, when he dreamed of love. They had to take down the advertisements. The children walked around the neighborhood with the same thorough diligence with which they had put them up, and explained to everyone they met that the operation is canceled due to technical reasons. Some people sympathized. Some didn't understand why they had started this whole story in the first place. And life went on. Marshall recovered, removed the collar, became the same affectionate cat as before. The children found new interests. The adults returned to their concerns. But something changed, something important. The children for the first time encountered the fact that the adult world can be cruel, that decisions are made 44 without them, for them, against their wishes, that not all dreams come true. And now, in the German apartment, Arkadiy thinks of this day as a turning point. Not dramatic, not obvious, but important. On that day, his children grew up several years at once, understood that life is not a fairy tale, that stories don't always have a happy ending. And he also thinks about what a whirlpool of events rages in a person's head, how memory jumps from joy to sorrow, from light to darkness, from major to minor. How memories layer on top of each other, mix, create an incredible mosaic of lived life. Just a moment ago, he was a young student, in love with a girl from medical school. And now he's already remembering his children, who were posting advertisements to find a bride for their cat. And somewhere nearby, on the periphery of consciousness, other memories are already looming. Later, more painful ones. Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't obey logic, doesn't go in order. It lives its own life, snatches from the past what it wants, when it wants, and you can't do anything about it, only float along the current of this stream, hoping that eventually you'll wash up on some shore. Arkadiy closes his eyes And as it seems to him, here's Marshall meowing behind the wall. That very Marshall whom they rescued during their flight, who survived with them through war, the journey, arrival in a foreign country, who never found his bride, but found something more important: loyalty, devotion, the love of a family that will never betray him. And perhaps this is true happiness. Not what you dream of, but what you receive. Not ideal, not fairy tale, but real, living, your own. And it seems Marshall meows behind the wall. And in this meowing is heard not longing for what didn't happen, but simply the desire for someone from the family to pay attention to him, to pet him, to talk to him, to let him know he's needed, that he's loved, that he's home. And immediately lines are born.
How important it is to live and know that someone loves you, will always understand, forgive, and simply not judge. And how easy it is when you don't have to pretend and can be sad at times, then smile again when they hurry to warm you amid the blizzard's frost. How important it is to understand that you are needed by someone. And Arkadiy understands. Memory can jump however it wants. Events can be joyful or sad, but the main thing remains unchanged. The main thing is love. Love that binds people to each other stronger than any bonds. Love that makes a family not only of people, but also of a ginger cat who once dreamed of a bride and now simply dreams of dinner. And the whirlpool in his head calms down a bit, because there is an anchor. There is something that keeps him afloat. There is family.